The story of the UK is an economy that has got real momentum.
What is broken can be repaired. What is ruined can be rebuilt.
UK inflation is becoming much more homegrown.
We have huge potential as an economy in the UK.
This is a time to tell Israel there is a path to peace.
Our plan for the British economy is working, but the work is not done.
Hello, you're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Welcome to the programme.
Well, we do like to bring you one story every episode on the UK Politics podcast, something from Westminster and beyond. And today, of course, it's the local elections taking place around the country on Thursday. Rishi Sunak has urged his party to take part in what he's called the greatest comeback in political history. This was, of course, during a pre-election pep talk that he gave at Conservative HQ this week. The odds so far, though, don't look particularly in his favour.
Perhaps not surprising that he needs to give a pep talk to his party if they've looked at the polls recently. The Labour Party consistently having a 20-point lead in national polls ahead of a general election. And the Conservative Party's performance tomorrow in these local elections could actually prove critical too in determining Sunak's future as Prime Minister. Could those making noises behind the scenes about whether he's the right person to lead them into the general election be inspired to take more bold action if it doesn't go in their favour? Our reporters have been looking at two particular races, the West Midlands Mayor and Tees Valley mayoralty elections. They're the ones that are going to be most important because they're currently held by two Conservative mayors. If they lost their seats, that would be seen as being a particularly bad day for the Conservatives. That might encourage those who are disgruntled, those MPs, to start writing the letters that could lead to a leadership challenge.
Yeah, OK. But look, they're important in and of themselves. It's 11 mayors in England, 107 councils, 37 police and crime commissioners, plus more than 2,600 council seats. London, always of particular interest. I mean, the city reflects some of the bitter debates in the UK on migration, on environment, also some of the most challenging issues on housing, on affordability and on crime. That is particularly pertinent given the latest terrible stabbing in Hainault in northeast London, which resulted in the death of a 14-year-old yesterday. That has propelled Mayor Sadiq Khan's record on tackling knife crime to the forefront, I think, of this election campaign. All of the issues, though, are in the manifestos of the 13 candidates who are running for the position in London. The full candidates list can be found on London Elects, the London Elects website. Remember, this is now a different system in London. It's first past the post. So that sort of shakes things up too. Sadiq Khan's looking for a third term in office, vowing to end London's homelessness problem. Susan Hall is the Conservative candidate. She's talking about trying to reduce crime and also scrapping the ULEZ expansion.
Now, the latest YouGov polling published on Tuesday put Sadiq Khan at 47%, Hall on 25%. Well, we've been speaking to representatives from the Conservative, Liberal, Democrat and Green parties about where they stand over the past couple of weeks running up to this electoral vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Susan Hall, I mentioned, is the one running for the Conservative Party. She's a former leader of the London Assembly Conservative group. Now, she's focused on what she calls ending the war on motorists, in her words, also scrapping the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone, recruiting more police. Now, I spoke to someone representing her, the current leader of the Conservatives in the London Assembly, Neil Garrett, about Susan Hall and the Tories' mayoral pitch. Have a listen.
What we have is a vision of a London that is safer, where the police are on the streets, properly funded, getting a grip of crime, where the housing that we're building is focused on family housing, which we know we have a particular shortage of. And finally, on transport, particularly, again, here in outer London, is about ULEZ and the concerns about sort of pay-per-mile plans that the mayor might have. But actually, on public transport, I think Sadiq has not done a very good job. We've seen him repeatedly prefer, for example, a sort of populist short-term fares freeze, which sucks cash out of TfL. You know, we warned the previous two elections ago that if he pursued that policy, you would see sort of maintenance and capital investment in the network degrade, and ultimately the network degrade. And that's what we're seeing, you know, on the Central line. We're starting to see it on the Bakerloo line. In my patch in Croydon, we're seeing it on the trams. They're getting to end of life and the cash isn't there because of the mayor's preference for sort of short-termism. So I think it's that. a safe London, a London where people can make a home, and a London where people can get around easily. That's what we'd like to see after Thursday.
So Neil Garrett there speaking about the Conservatives' pitch for the Mayor of London role, Susan Hall being their candidate. I mean, Garrett was critical of Sadiq Khan for not giving the Metropolitan Police Chiefs, Mark Rowling, Cressida Dick, enough political support. That was one of their points that Susan Hall has also made in terms of the attitude to crime.
Yeah, and indeed, actually, crime was a big issue too when I spoke to the Liberal Democrats candidate Rob Blackie. That's a central part of his campaign. He himself was mugged in London, had his neck broken as part of that, and he particularly wants to reform how the Met is run. Let's take a listen to my conversation with Rob Blackie.
My plan is to fix the Metropolitan Police. We need to get more police back on the front line. Right now in London, for 6,000 Met Police stuck in the back office, that is double the rate of the average British police force. So we've got thousands of experienced police who should be out there solving crimes, who aren't doing the jobs that they need to do. And we also do need to have a focus on the most serious crimes like rape and sexual offences, where the mayor's record has been worst.
How much is that going to cost?
Well, we've said that what we would do is Sadiq Khan has an election gimmick, fare freeze, something that really is only for single fares, so it mainly helps tourists. If you cancel that, that saves about £60 million. Would spread that over 4 years. We'd think at the bare minimum we'd be able to get several hundred police back on the beat, potentially quite a lot more.
So Rob Blackie from the Lib Dems there, touching on issues around crime and around transport as well. Of course, the issue of ULEZ, one of the more controversial policies implemented under Sadiq Khan. We know it was a big issue in the Uxbridge by-election. This is a conversation that I was also having with the Green Party about whether Londoners really are ready for more climate-friendly policies, given the controversy there had been over ULEZ. So I spoke to Zoe Garbett. She's the Green candidate for the Mayor of London. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
I think people are ready for more climate policies. We've seen people, really desperate and really affected by the climate emergency. It's been affecting small businesses. We've seen increased wildfires in the city and flooding. And I think people know that, climate crisis is here and now. Our policies are all about kind of embedding the climate emergency, though, across all that we do, not just kind of small changes or big projects, but just making sure that everything we're doing is considering the climate. What we often talk about is some of the cost of living policies and changes are also climate policies, things like accelerating the insulation of people's homes will bring their bills down, will cut emissions. So it's also really kind of good for the planet. So that's a kind of green approach. It's embedding, taking a kind of climate and planet consideration in every decision.
So that's Zoe Garbett from the Green Party as well. Now, for these smaller parties, we mentioned the change in the voting system. First past the post is how the London mayoral election. That traditionally disadvantages smaller parties, something that I put to both the Greens and the Lib Dems when I spoke to them. And Zoe Garbett saying that people can still vote with confidence and the Greens aren't going to wait in the wings and step back favouring one of the other candidates while they oppose the change in the electoral system. They've talked about it being quite damaging. Rob Blackie for Lib Dems saying that doesn't rule them out. He thinks the Conservatives have no hope to win and that the Lib Dems definitely still have a chance in this as well.
Now, we did ask Sadiq Khan, the current Labour Mayor of London, to speak to us, or someone from the Labour campaign. They weren't available to speak to us. So instead, we brought in our UK government reporter, Alex Wickham, who has been covering the Labour campaign and the elections here in the capital. Sadiq Khan is the most well-known of the candidates. I mean, unsurprising, given that he's the incumbent. He's had 2 terms in office. He has to defend his record. What is he promising to deliver in what would be an unprecedented 3rd term?
It would. And Sadiq Khan is promising things like making free school meals permanent in London. He wants to keep TfL fares, travel fares frozen. He is very keen to tell us that he is not going to introduce a pay per mile scheme, as the Tories sort of claim about him, road pricing essentially. And it's more of building on what he's done on things like clean air in London and house building and and new council homes, social housing as well. But obviously, he, as the incumbent, needs, that's a prop factor in his positive direction. But also, the Tories have a bit of a area to attack on his record.
Yeah, indeed. That was something that came up in all of our conversations around this election as well, and in particular the mayor's record on crime. Is this a sign that that's a serious problem he's failed to tackle as mayor?
I mean, crime is always a really tough one to get good statistics on. It's very hard, whether you're talking nationally or locally, to know, is crime up, is crime down? Is that a too simplistic way of looking at it? And people always debate the figures. However, it is clear that there is a feeling among large numbers of voters in London that crime is an issue, and crime hasn't really gone in a good direction under Sadiq Khan's tenure as mayor. Things like knife crime, we've seen appalling killing, in the last few days in London, but also, things as simple as mobile phone muggings and things like that, which do appear to have soared in the last few years. This is something that the Tories certainly really want to attack. Khan says, well, crime's up nationally. It's a problem of Tory police cuts over the last decade, but it's certainly a soft spot for Khan.
Okay, so that on the Labour perspective then, in terms of the mayoral elections in London. Just more broadly though, Alex, how important is Thursday going to be? If you look across the swathe of the elections, what are you going to be writing about on Friday?
Well, it is an indicator ahead of the general election, of where the Tories stand. Are things as bad for Rishi Sunak as the national polls suggest, and have suggested for the last year, really, of Labour being miles ahead? There are local mayors with incumbents, as we've just been talking about, in places like Tees Valley, where Tory Ben Houchin, hopes to hold on, in the West Midlands, where another Tory, Andy Street, is perhaps more in the balance but would hope to hold on. Those don't necessarily reveal that things are suddenly going in a better direction for Rishi Sunak, but it might just be enough to get the Prime Minister through the next few weeks and for him to avoid any sort of leadership threat against him from internal Tory critics.
Okay, Alex Wickham, our senior UK government reporter, thanks very much for joining us as we look ahead to tomorrow's elections.
Yeah, well, that's it from us for today. It's been interesting to hear from all of the candidates, representatives. Now, just a reminder, you can find a full list of all candidates running in all the elections, so up and down England and Wales tomorrow. That is on the Electoral Commission website.
And their manifestos for the London candidates, by the way, available on the London Elects website too. Today's episode was produced by Tiwa Adebayo. Our audio engineer was Sean Guastamakia. I'm Stephen Carroll.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. We'll be back with more on Friday. This is Bloomberg.